Mafia 3's composite parts are genuinely excellent, from their frequently stunning new Bordeaux settings to its fantastic story rife with social commentary, with memorable characters superbly performed. And who could forget the phenomenal soundtrack? So good, it gives GTA Vice City a run for its money. On the flip side, there's an element of polish somewhat absent from the finished article. Developer Hangar 13 have said themselves, Mafia 3 needs more time dedicated to ironing out the kinks. With Mafia 4 recently rumored, and with Hangar 13 going through something of a restructure, let's hope that the next title in their acclaimed Mafia series fixes the annoying issues holding back the third title. Bugs and glitches. Most AAA games ship with their fair share of bugs and glitches, but these should be minor at most and be patched up pretty quickly, making the jump from the semi-linear, not quite open world in Mafia 2 to the vast open city in Mafia 3, including side quests and extra content, presented developer Hangar 13 with a raft of problems which they weren't fully accustomed. Plus, as is often the case, the development team weren't given ample time by 2K's executives to rectify any bugs prior to release. PC port. Mafia 3's earnest replication of New Orleans is oftentimes stunning, with nighttime vistas especially radiant. It's a shame, then, that the game's PC port launch was marred by muddy textures and motion blur, even when set to native resolution. The game also launched to PC with a frame rate capped at 30 FPS. Whilst an update allowing players to uncap the frame rate came quickly, it begs the question why this feature wasn't included at launch. Either way, load times remained horrendously slow, even for PCs with higher CPU power, with even the most high-end GPUs struggling to consistently maintain 60 FPS. All these shortcomings point to a PC port which required some extra optimization work. Grinding gameplay loop. Once Mafia 3's exceptional opening act is over and done with, the grind sets in. To complete the story, the game's 10 districts need to be conquered by clearing out racket mob bosses, and to do this, they need to be destabilized by taking on various other tasks designed to gradually crumble their empire. Whilst this gameplay loop is fun at first, it begins to grade over the course of 10 to 20 hours playtime. Engaging story from start to finish. Mafia 3's narrative themes rightly received praise. From Hangar 13 bravely portrayed tense race relations and segregations in 1960s America through the eyes of a Vietnam War veteran, a narrative choice unexplored in video games thus far. The game's story overall is one of its redeeming factors, but as is often the case with open world games and open world with endless repetition, as in New Bordeaux, the story loses focus and impact the further along it goes. Interesting protagonist. Mafia 3's Lincoln Clay is back in the USA after fighting for his country in the Vietnam War. He's swiftly embroiled in family feuds with mobsters and crime syndicate bosses, ensuring his homecoming is bloody and violent throughout all of his trauma. Clay remains steadfast in his approach. It's not your cookie-cutter tale of revenge, and the voice acting is stellar throughout. It's just that Clay doesn't ever seem that interested in what's happening. His character barely evolves throughout the game's narrative, so this is something the developers could address for Mafia 4. Repetitive mission design. Not only did Mafia 3 not bring anything new to the table, but it's also fair to say a lot of the missions in the game are mere variations on the same thing. Conquering rackets by taking out lieutenants, sneaking, killing, destroying, stealing, it all winds up feeling like the same thing over and over again. And it's not like taking command of the city's rackets is optional. No, they're necessary to see the story through to the end, and completing enough racket tasks unlocks story missions. Side quests. When Mafia 3's main mission design resembling something of a side quest in another open world game, the actual side quests in the game are amiss. Good side content in open world video games adds richness and density to the world, fleshing out stories of its inhabitants. Mafia 3 mercifully isn't bloated by side missions, but what is there is essentially fetching stuff for Haitian mob boss Cassandra to unlock weapons and other goodies. It's a bit of a missed opportunity, for New Bordeaux's visceral blend of swamps, slums, and skyrises is punctuated by NPCs whose behavior will adjust depending on your nefarious actions. Even your own underboss, whom you've handpicked to run your freshly pinched districts, will turn on you if you neglect them for long enough. All this is to say, there's unexplored potential for side missions that'd complete this excellent world building. Meaningful collectibles. As with side content, Mafia 3's New Bordeaux isn't crammed full of collectibles either. There are album covers, magazines, propaganda posters, and paintings to pick up on your travels, but none of these collectibles service a story in any way. They're essentially pointless busywork for completionists to waste their time with. They're tokens of recognition that should add HP or abilities, or at the very least, flesh out a game's lore. Improved cover system. Pretty self-explanatory, this one. The gunplay in Mafia 3 was one of its stronger points. Repetitive, sure, but the gunshot sound effects were punchy and effective. That said, the game's cover system has Clay unfathomably dive out from behind an obstacle. Plus, the odd time it's seemingly impossible to hide behind something is clumsy and frustrating, with many an unnecessary death the result. Enemy AI. Dumbfounding is how the enemy AI can be described in Mafia 3. Clearing out mob strongholds becomes rudimentary, for any enemy semblance of self-preservation is out the window as soon as Clay starts shooting. The enemy AI thoughtlessly steps into open fire during gunfights. They'll struggle to see Clay from meters away. They'll always allow the sound of a whistle like an obedient dog. Improving enemy behavior will go some way to easing the fatigue of Mafia 3's repetitive mission design. Stealth. Mixing up gameplay are the stealth mechanics. However, whistling to grab an enemy's attention before quickly knifing them after they've absent-mindedly wandered over becomes the tried and true tested means of silent takedown you'll use throughout the game's playtime. Improving stealth mechanics is linked to enemy and NPC AI. When NPCs audibly react to Clay's action, lamenting the death of their lieutenant in conversation for instance, then it's just jarring when they don't learn to adapt to your whistling tactic. Vehicle control. Okay, perhaps the most subjective point on this rundown. There are plenty out there who will like the way Mafia 3's cars handle. Sure, the arcade style certainly benefits a game of this type, where there are lots of driving. There are always times when a pragmatic journey from point A to point B means you'll likely prefer not to wrestle with realism. Switch to the more responsive vehicle simulation mode, however, and cars can feel floaty. Maybe vehicle handling is something that doesn't necessarily need to be fixed for Mafia 4, just maintained so it doesn't go backwards. Fast travel. A feature and absolute prerequisite for open world games is fast travel. Some prefer not to use it, sure, but heading across vast cityscapes block after block just to spend a couple of minutes on an objective before having to head home could be an awful lot less time consuming were fast travel an option. Mafia 3's lack of fast travel feeds into its repetitive nature, with players endlessly trekking back and forth across New Bordeaux to carry out the same objectives. Avoid reusing locations. The appearance of New Bordeaux is one of Mafia 3's greatest strengths. It's a broad expanse of swampy wetlands, run-down slums, and glitzy high-rises. Missions take place in some exceptional locations as well, with the ghostly abandoned theme park a highlight. Why then do some missions require Clay head back to the same warehouse compounds and bathhouses to clear out multiple enemies that have already been wiped out? Bland color filter. Clearly, Hangar 13 were going for a sepia aesthetic that'd reflect the allure of 1960s cinema. It works to a degree, but it's also fair to point out that it's a tad overdone, especially in daytime. New Bordeaux streets are often washed out in faded browns and gray. It's not the most evocative color palette, which is a shame as New Bordeaux is frequently beautiful at nighttime when the game's muted colors are less pronounced. Did you know? We at GamingBolt upload new videos every day. Stick around, drop a like, subscribe, and let us know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future with a comment below.